Hey, Larken Rose here, and I am constantly talking about how I am a voluntarist for moral reasons because initiating violence against people is wrong. I didn't get to be an anarchist by deciding that on a practical level it works better, even though it totally does. I got there by realizing it's the only moral choice. Now, when I talk about those things, invariably some people will say, well, how do you define right and wrong? Like, people don't all have the exact same opinion of right and wrong, and how do you define it? And you need some, there's a few different things that people chime in with. One is you need some objective definition of morality that applies to everybody the same. And then some people say, no, you need to believe in a deity, like you need to believe in the Christian God, or you can't possibly have morality, which is also wrong. And they bicker back and forth about, well, how are you defining morality? And what if somebody else thinks it's okay to kill and eat his neighbors and things like that? So they're constantly asking that I get into the discussion of what does moral mean? How do you define it? How do you define right and wrong? And there's two things I have to say to that. That is a fine, worthy discussion that I sometimes have with people I know. And I'm not going to do that in public for the most part, and I don't need to do it in public. And obsessing over the finer points of how exactly are you going to define morality is worse than a waste of time. It's an unnecessary distraction. If we lived in a society where a huge portion of people thought it was okay to just steal and murder and kill people, first of all, you're not going to talk them into morality anyway. You're not going to reason them into giving a damn about other people because there is no such way. And second of all, I don't think there is a way to start with no premise and define morality as if you don't have it. I'm going to use a Christian phrase, even though I'm not a Christian. As if you don't have it written on your heart. That you can't tell if somebody's running around chopping up children with an axe. You can't tell that's bad. You need to look up a definition. You need somebody's analytical explanation of why that's not okay. If that's the case, you're probably a psycho, and I would run away from you. But the beauty is, I don't need to define it because the vast majority of people have enough in common with however they view morality that it doesn't matter. And that's what we get into with Candles in the Dark. It's what The Mirror is going to get into when I eventually finish that dang thing. Where when you just ask people about what they think is right and wrong, the vast majority are against stealing and they're against assault and they're against murder. Now, why are they? Don't know, don't care. I mean, I sort of know and I sort of care. But on a practical level, I don't care. If a bunch of them say, I think stealing's wrong because the Bible says so. If a bunch of them say, I think stealing wrong because this other religion says so. If a bunch of them say, I think stealing wrong because it just feels wrong to me, that person, I wouldn't want that to happen to me, so I'm not doing it to them. If someone has some sophisticated philosophical explanation of why he thinks morality makes stealing wrong, I don't really care the why of why people think that stealing and assault are wrong. I just care that they believe that. And if they didn't believe that, we're not going to get along very well. And I'm not going to talk them out of it if they actually think it's okay to rob and assault and murder people. But if they recognize that, yeah, that's not ideal, we try to avoid that. Whether there's a religious reason or a philosophical reason or even just a practical reason of I don't steal because people beat me up if I do, we can still get along. We can still peacefully coexist. And that's why I don't get into it. But there's so many people that they seem so determined to philosophize about everything that they sort of forget the goal of having it so we're in a peaceful society where you can sit around and philosophize, discuss these things without anybody driving a tank into your living room. And that's my goal, is to minimize tanks in living rooms. And it doesn't require having some exact definition of right and wrong. It doesn't even require everyone to agree on the finer points in the gray areas, because they're not going to. But it requires most people to agree on the basics of don't attack people and take their stuff and kill them, like don't murder people. And most people are already on board with that. And when their beliefs aren't on board on that, it's almost always because an authority is telling them that there's an exception. Sometimes religions say, well, if somebody does this sin of whatever it is, even if they're not like hurting anybody or attacking anybody, then they shall be stoned to death. Luckily, that's sort of become passé to murder people for victimless sins. And if people believe in government, then they believe, oh, well, robbery when it's called taxation and done by thugs of the state, well, that's perfectly fine. And thuggery done by law enforcement and thugs of the state, well, that's perfectly fine. But they were taught exceptions to the moral rules they already have built into them, that they already accept, that they already observe in their day-to-day lives, in how they live and how they treat other people. And I don't care where that came from on a practical basis. And it doesn't mean the philosophical discussion doesn't have a place or shouldn't happen. But as I've often pointed out, there's a lot of things that I'm interested and fascinated by that I don't talk about in public. I'll talk about it to people I know. Because to me, achieving a society of peaceful coexistence, which requires the absence of a ruling class, since they're always coercive and immoral and violent, that's what allows us the luxury of sitting around and philosophizing about things and trying to define things and all that. Until then, the practical threat of almost everybody advocating that I be robbed and dominated because they believe in government and they vote for it, that's kind of the thing that matters right now, which is why the thing I focus on, like in almost everything I do, has to do with getting people to see the lie behind authority, getting them to outgrow that superstition so they can actually peacefully coexist. Now, there's still going to be some psychos and stuff that do nasty things, and the rest of us have to defend ourselves. And most of us already recognize, yeah, we have the right to defend ourselves. And that guy running around, robbing and attacking people, he's the bad guy. He's who we need defending from. Okay, that's fine. And that's all that's required for peaceful coexistence. So my goal is not to have everybody agree with me on every detail. First of all, that'd be a really boring world. If everybody agreed with me on every detail of everything I believe. That would be creepy, like a clone world. My goal in what I actually do publicly is to see if I can get as many people as possible, hopefully everybody, but maybe just most people, to agree on peaceful coexistence. And then we can nitpick about the rest, and we can philosophize and discuss and debate everything else under the sun. But it's weird to me that a lot of people think we have to jam on the brakes and well, we can't advocate voluntarism until we have some elaborate, intricate definition of exactly what objective morality is and why. It's no, we don't at all need that to get along. I can get along with lots of people in lots of different religions if they believe in treating other human beings with respect. And if they don't, because of their belief in religion and government, well, that's the problem, and that's what I'm aiming at. And I don't need to give them some formula to adopt my view of what morality even means, which is different than almost everybody else's. But it doesn't matter. Because if they don't attack people and don't rob them and don't murder them, okay, well, we should probably get along fine if they don't believe there's an exception for government, or it used to be the church and religious, yada, yada, yada. But now mostly the exemption from morality that people imagine comes from their belief in government. And that's all I want to go away for now. And the rest we can spend the next 100 years discussing the details of how you define morality. But a lot of people are well, this isn't consistent. It's not complete. You're not done until we nitpick about every detail. And I mean, I appreciate the idea of I want to all the way understand. I want a complete view. I want to, whatever I'm gray on and not sure how it works, I want to think about that. Cool, do that. Have discussions, have debates. But the thing that matters isn't that. The thing that matters is very simple. It's very basic. It's something that in their day-to-day lives almost everybody already believes and already abides by. We just need to apply that to everything and have people stop believing that there's an exception when violent aggression is done in the name of authority. So when people say, well, you have to give me a definition of this. No, I stinking don't, and I'm not going to. Sorry, because right now it doesn't matter. And it's not like the discussion shouldn't happen, but it doesn't stinking matter to the goal of drastically reducing the injustice and suffering and man's inhumanity to man going on all over the world. We don't need to agree why you shouldn't attack somebody else. We just need to agree you shouldn't attack somebody else. So that's why I don't harp on that. Yeehaw. You can have lots of different opinions and lots of different lifestyles, and you can have a bunch of different views, and we can debate the pros and cons of all sorts of behaviors and lifestyles and attitudes. And as long as we grasp like something like the non-aggression principle, whether you call it that or not, as long as most people get, don't violently attack people, we're fine. But you can have different beliefs, different religious beliefs, different behaviors, different ideas about what a family should be, what love should be, what all these things. You can let your hair grow too long like a big poofy mess. You can have a weird mohawk. You can have short hair and look sort of like a fascist. As long as we agree on the basics of morality, we don't even need to be able to define morality or say where it comes from. So, can't we all just get along as long as we give up statism? Yeah, we don't have to agree on all the details.